Kaixo. Oso ondatazu?
Zako zorkozpena.
Bai.
Esan duztia, kastari bat emator. Esan duztia, Valencia, ez dakit izen batzuk esan duztia, eta gero...
Etala?
Rekursu batzuk hartzeko.
Correr.
Ose, nikeo el tema, zera, mendo nazte borrazten di bat, ez?
Bueno, hau da, Kolombiako zera. Arratsaldeon. Arratsaldeon. Arratsaldeon guztioi. Arratsaldeon eta ongi etorri. Jaun Andreok, herri agintariok.
I'm afraid these opening words are in Basque, for which there is no translation at this meeting, so we will just wait until she switches to Spanish. Thank you.
Oraingoan Bilbotik ari gatzaizkitzue, baino nundik hitz egiten ari garen gaur ez da leku fisiko bat. Gaur bihotzetik hitz egiten dizuegu, barrutik eta hortik esaten dizuegu ongi etorri. Arratsaldeon y muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon to everyone, institutional representatives, colleagues from the support nodes for the Truth Commission, friends who are with us in Bilbao and those who have joined us via streaming through from many parts of the world. Thank you very much for taking part this afternoon in the presentation of the final report of the Commission to clarify the truth in Colombia. It's a very special moment for the Department of Equality, Justice and Social Policies of the Basque Government with the EGOA Institute and the collaboration of the Colombia panel and the Basque Node. Thank you for your work and for your commitment. Hannah Arendt said, "Where we are all guilty, nobody is." The roots of a statement like this can be found behind all conflicts. We need perseverance and generosity to agree that we need to untangle the causes, the responsibilities and the consequences to be able to escape from the spiral of resignation. To be able to look at the future with hope, we need to understand the past. Colombia, within the framework of the integrated system for truth, justice, reparation and non-repetition, has made that effort, and today we're presenting in the Basque Country and for all Europe the final report, which for the first time in the history of the Commissions of Truth includes a chapter on exile. It's been 3 years of work, research, listening and in-depth intellectual and experience analysis of the armed conflict in Colombia. And today we reach a historic day for Colombia. After more than 5 decades of violence, peace has found a way. And we know that this is a fragile construction by nature that needs to strengthen its foundations in spite of all the contradictions and setbacks. This report not only reports the why and what for of so many years of violence, but is a framework of a path towards non-repetition. We know that it's not enough to design the path, that we need to walk along it. The Colombia conflict goes beyond borders and needs the help of the entire international society. If we are here today, it's because this call to international society has been listened to. The Commission for the Truth in Colombia has been able to work abroad and make the victims of exile visible, thanks to the solidarity, generosity and support of various organizations, groups, institutions and individuals, many of whom are here today. Once again, thank you very much. And representing some of these institutions that have made it possible for us to be here on this historic day, I'm going to introduce and hand the floor over to the people that are on the panel Gorka Moreno, Mónica Hernando, and Iranchu Mendia. Gorka Moreno is the Vice Rector of the Vizcaya campus of the University of the Basque Country. Therefore, we're in his house today. Thank you very much, Gorka. And he's also an expert in migration. And I would therefore like to ask him how the Academy took on a job such as that of the Truth Commission. And I would also like to know his opinion on to what extent the Exile chapter provides a new gaze on Colombian migration. A lot of questions, Gorka. Please go ahead. Again, these opening words are in Basque. Welcome to the University of the Basque Country. Thank you very much for this invitation. Congratulations to the Agoa Institute for the work done. And also thank you very much for being able to be what I was a year and a half ago when I was a lecturer and a researcher on migration. We have very little time, so I'll try to answer the question. I'll obviously have to read the chapter on exile in detail, but I think it's an extremely important element. And in these peace processes, in these conflicts, it's an issue that not enough work has been done on. So the existence of a chapter of this nature, I think, is very interesting. And especially with the collective from Colombia. In the area of migration, we play with the dichotomy between forced migrations and economic migrations. Beyond the debate on this dichotomy, which I think is valuable and thought-provoking for its analysis, and it's very complicated to make this dichotomy operational, but I think it is interesting to include this variable, especially because in the case of the migrants of Colombian origin, under the label of economic migrant, because of the difficulties involved in applying for asylum, many people have actually come that came because of a forced migration for political reasons and other reasons. So being able to include these variables, this equation in the analysis, being able to look at the differences between the conceptual definitions of migration, these exiles that have come for economic reasons in appearance. But I think that this is very thought-provoking. And again, he has switched to Basque, so again, we will wait for him to switch back to Spanish. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gorka, and thanks to the University of the Basque Country. Mónica Hernando Porres is Director of Human Rights, Victims and Diversity, and we said before that a lot of work has been involved, and we are going to need to review it slowly and carefully. Why has the Basque government taken on this commitment under your department? Well, to control the time and my emotions, I'm going to read the answer because we've really been very emotional these last few days. I would like to welcome those of you that have come here from different parts of Europe, as well as those of you that are following this event via streaming, who are sharing such an special and exciting event at a historic moment when justice is being made, recognizing the pain and suffering and also the dignity of the victims of a conflict that has lasted too long, a conflict that has generated millions of victims, as we've been able to hear this morning. And a conflict that meant that many of you here were forced to flee and to leave your homes, suffering a dual victimization. The Basque Country has been linked to Colombia for many years, a link through solidarity and cooperation of many organizations, many of which are here, and also the Basque institutions. that have accompanied processes of resistance, rehabilitation, struggle and peace. And since 2016, this accompaniment has been intensified through an attempt to implement the necessary peace agreements to put an end to that inhuman and unjust violence. So from the Basque government, we have backed peace and the implementation of the Havana agreements. And briefly, I would like to give you three very brief ideas as to why this support for the peace process in general and accompanying the Commission of Truth has formed part of the work done under the exile chapter, mainly. First of all, because of the importance of events and processes such as this to guarantee the non-repetition of what has happened. Our country, our people also suffered decades of political violence, and we have a large number of victims of terrorism and violence with whom we work closely to build a shared memory. Our memory policies include the right to truth, justice and reparation that all victims have, but we also try to establish the basis to guarantee non-repetition. And as a society, our aim is to build a better future, a future where we will not repeat the same mistakes, a future where we will be able to say that we've learned something, a future where our young people will not have to go through the same barbarous events and the same suffering that our grandparents, our parents, or we ourselves have suffered. A future where a civil society will never be bombed again. A society where people, just because they think differently, because they speak differently, because they feel different, are abandoned to leave their homes. The second reason is because the importance of events and processes such as this to make the invisible visible, to make visible what for many years has been silenced, to make visible the truth of what happened. And what better way of making it visible than through the testimonies of the people that have suffered violence directly, through the testimony of the victims. Listening to the victims makes us empathize with them and think about not just the injustice they went through in the past, but also to see them as actors, protagonists in the building of peaceful coexistence in the present and the future. And the third and final reason is because of the importance of events and processes like this in the contribution to a future with a memory. There is future and there is memory. We share this statement. Without truth, we cannot build a future in peace. We cannot guarantee a just, authentic and long-lasting peace. And I would add that there are futures and there's recognition. There is future if there's memory, a memory where we are all capable of reading not only our chapter, but the chapter of all the violations of human rights that have taken place as the only way of moving towards a future in peace and coexistence, a complete memory without hatred, without revenge, a clean memory where we all feel a part of it, a critical memory that will contribute to avoiding making the same mistakes in the future. My congratulations to the Commission, especially today to Alejandro and Carlos, well, doubly to Carlos. My congratulations also to the Basque node, Calleja, Llana, and others, and to all the nodes, EGOA, because they've made this complicated bureaucratic relationship easy, and they've made this path very easy. We've worked very well together. And my sincere recognition to all the victims here and those that are watching and those that haven't been able to come. And also to repeat the commitment of the Basque government. This doesn't end here. Carlos said it yesterday, he said it this morning. It's a step in the process. It's not the end of the path. There's a legacy. There's a lot to be done. And the commitment of continuing to accompany you is a firm decision on our part. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mónica Hernando. The seed for the future is truth, as we heard this morning. And she just referred to how easy it has been to work with the EGOA Institute. So we're going to ask Irantxu Mendia from the Institute in what way the Institute has taken part in this path that has brought us here today. Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Gorka. Thank you, Monica. These words again are in Basque. For those of you that don't speak Basque, my heart is also thumping, and I just really understand how the people from Colombia that form part of this must feel. The EGOA Institute belongs to the University of the Basque Country, and I would like to greet you all. Everybody here today, I thank you enormously for coming. I thank you for being able to create this link between people from different places from around the world, because we're carrying out an exercise of the right to truth. And we believe that people that are victims of violence have the right to truth. This violence that has been investigated by the Columbia Truth Commission for several years, but we also believe that it's a right we have collectively. It's a right of societies and of international society, the right to know. It's an unalienable right of the peoples that demands that states meet the right to memory as the other side of the coin of the rights of the peoples. And the commitment of EGOA started in 2019 with Colombia. It's a path where we've had the essential and steady support of the Department for Victims, Human Rights and now Diversity under the Basque government. We've also had the support of the UN Programme for Development. We've also had support from the Basque Agency for International Cooperation, Lankidecha. Our aim has been to contribute to the extraterritorial presence of the Truth Commission to carry out this mandate with victims abroad and those exiled in Europe in particular. So to give you a few examples of the kind of activities that have been carried out over these years, here are several. First of all, collecting testimonies of exiled victims here in the Basque Country, in Spain, also in countries like Sweden, Norway, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, France, Italy. We've carried out social and institutional recognition actions of truth in the countries of residence of the exiled victims as a form of reparation to some extent. We've held several meetings or encounters. To give you an example, the encounter for the recognition of the second generation of Colombian exiles, and more recently, measures related to establishing the necessary environment to receive this report, putting emphasis on the exile chapter. And on behalf of EGOA, we hereby renew our commitment to socialize the report, and we renew our commitment to support the implementation of its recommendations, since we feel that it also forms part of what should be the DNA of a university, serving social processes to promote social justice and human rights. But this path is a path that we don't walk along alone. There are many more people, institutions, entities, organizations, collectives, and although they've been named here, I would also like to express my thanks to the Basque government, to the Department of Equality, Justice and Social Policies, to the Colombia panel that is made up of Basque entities that express their solidarity with the Colombian people. Also, the support nodes for the Commission, especially the Basque support node, the Commission itself, And of course, I'd like to mention the EGOA team and the rest of collectives and institutions that have been mentioned that have been involved in the front line of the organisation of a macro meeting like this one, with all the challenges that means. So thank you all very much. And she switched back to Basque. I was saying that these days have been full of emotions, so we'll let you go down to the front row to not have to display your emotions. But where can we begin with? There's so much to be said. As part of the collection of the books Future in Transit, and we strongly recommend them, a book promoted by the Commission, there's a volume that sounds especially important. Bernardo Toro, in the volume on responsibility, spoke to us about the importance, and I'll quote what he said, doing what needs to be done every day to make a society work. And this reminds us that in spite of what we sometimes think, to change a society, we often don't need to do extraordinary things. What really transforms us is doing what we've undertaken to do well every day. He says that I think it's a superpower that we all have, the power of changing the society in which we live. This responsibility has a collective dimension. It belongs to you, it belongs to the people of Colombia. And it also has the unique contribution of people that have done every day what they undertook to do. And this also deserves a recognition. Carlos Martín Beristain and Alejandro Valencia are two members of the Colombia Truth Commission, and now they are going to speak to us about the final report. Let's make it easier by using a microphone. I think they're on. Opening words in Basque again. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you. A pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thank you, Alejo, for joining us at this presentation. I'm going to start talking about that work on exile, and then maybe Alejo can tell us something else about the overall report, and especially that volume that we call The Findings. When we refer to these chapters, you'll realize that this chapter is a little bit longer. And we've tried to include the basic core of what people told us from the beginning in Colombia when we started with the same visits to the victims. Many people said, we want a truth to explain why. Not just a truth that explains cases. There are many publications, a lot of research, and a lot of reports have been published, but people said, we want to explain the why. And this volume refers to those things that explained those persistent factors in the armed conflict. Colombia has tried to come out of the conflict for a long time, over 40 years, and all these attempts have been frustrated over and over again, and there have been new cycles of violence, the longest cycle in Latin America, certainly, and many of the explanations can be found in this chapter on why, as well as things that need to be changed so that won't continue to happen. But going back to exile, I'm going to talk about exile. There's a chapter in the report you already have. Practically all of you here already have the report. This started being a dream and a demand. Some victim organizations wrote to the Commission saying, we want to form part of this. We want to be listened to in this process. The truth of exile has to be part of this process. And we started some early consultations and made a first trip to try to meet with some of these people, to listen to what they thought if they wanted to participate. One of the first meetings was held in Ecuador, in Quito. There was a group there of 30 or 40 people. And one of the women, after introducing the Commission and explaining what this Commission is, the peace agreement, the difficulties involved, one of these women stood up and said, we want to speak. We've spoken before, but how do we know that this time something is going to be done about what we tell? And this is important because a work like this is a two-way trip. The Maya say that a trip is a two-way trip. If you do something, it's because you're going to learn. And if you're going to listen, it's because you're going to learn. We didn't know what we were going to do, but we were going to do something with a conviction that when you stand by somebody and work with somebody, something positive is going to come out. We don't know what. We don't have a roadmap. It had never been done before. How we were going to collect testimonies in 15, 20, 25 countries. Impossible. We didn't have the money to do it. Although we later found the resources, the Basque government gave us the resources to be able to do that work, and gave us some resources to do that work, and we found them little by little, but also with the conviction that we need complicity to do something like this. We had to invent a lot of things. There wasn't a methodology of cooperation to support a job like this. Things had to be invented, and I think that's very important because it shows us that when we have good foundations and good complicity with people, you find a way of doing it.
Principio.
And we're also convinced from the very, very beginning, and Alejo and I have participated in other processes. For example, in Peru, there's this group called Condecorep, a national coordinator for displaced individuals for the Quechua indigenous people of the Andes, those that were very much hit by a conflict as well. And when I started working with them, they told me once, we do not want to be a commodity. We want to be part of the process. Commodity, a bargaining chip. No, they didn't want to be seen as a commodity that would offer their testimony. They wanted to be engaged in the process. And you here in this room or following us online have been part of the process. You've been engaged in the process. We haven't been working with you as a commodity. We've worked with all of you, with people around the world that have, of course, worked around trust. Trust needs to be at the very, very center. We organized 10 workshops worldwide in order to collect testimonies, in order to train ourselves to learn how to listen, to learn in this process, to become stronger. And this is the process that we have followed. We always say that the Commission is an outcome. It's a report, but it's also a process. A work process that is extremely rich. The first testimonies of exile were taken home, the home of truth. Before the Commission started to collect testimonies, we're already working hard, and here we have some of the first people who gave their testimonies, Jose, Freitas, and others as well, who shared with us their story. And those first testimonies were very, very important because we understood that even though we have worked with victims for many years, of course, each story is unique and has its depth. It's not just about the assault, the attack, the shooting, the threats, or what happened with the colleague that was assassinated. No, we understand the whole depth of each story. There's this judge that prosecuted the Honduras massacre, who has a very, very interesting story. There are some stories from some accounts on Colombia that come from outside Colombia. And this is how we came up with this title, Colombia from Outside Colombia. These are the stories of the children of the diaspora, the children of exile that have to flee their homes to faraway countries that continue eating yuca, going to school in another language. And what we've tried to bring together in this report is this fragmented community. It has been a very profound, intense listening process, a very enriching process as well. And in that volume, in that chapter or book on exile, we can understand, we can grasp that armed conflict and attach some figures to exile, because exile is invisible. When we started to engage in discussions in Colombia, we understood that there were different territories, the Caribbean, but there's a world of Colombia, part of Colombia that is outside Colombia, and that had to be part of this dialogue in order to seek truth. We didn't have many international benchmarks or examples or best practices on which to base our work, but we decided to work hand in hand with victims from other conflicts in other countries. Exile is a non-place, if I may say. It's, midway towards nowhere. You cannot return to your country of origin, and you, find it hard to integrate in your host country. And you live a different time. You are like in the middle of times as well. And you live a reality that is ambivalent, where, sometimes it's hard to feel, part of that new place. But this is a place where we have all learned that we, all come from forced migrations. And we're talking about people that are looking for human dignity. And sometimes one may lose his or her nationality, his or her status. I remember this lady in Chile who told me being a refugee is trying to convince others that your truth is worth it, that your truth is genuine. And once again, sometimes victims are, neglected, are left behind, are sidelined, and their stories are, left to a side. And we treat victims as yet another migrant. And with this effort, with this commission, Alejandro is in the room, and we have created a small group of individuals that have done a huge work of coordination to collect testimonies, 2,100 testimonies. This is the number of testimonies that we have collected from the exile. And this comes to show that we have to give a space to exiles as well when building or rebuilding truth. When we asked the UNHCR how many Colombians had to leave the country because of the armed conflict, they told me, we really don't know. We really don't know. And we organized a working group with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to discuss these stats, and we saw that there's more than 1 million people that had to flee the country because of the armed conflict. We're talking about 1 million exiles, and we have talked about exile, but there are other concepts like cross-border displacement, asylum, forced migration, diaspora. All those concepts, of course, concepts don't always fit with reality or are able to completely personated. But of course, we need to make sure that the facts are understood, those facts that have led people to flee the country. We have identified 5 different patterns. We have political persecution, people that have had to leave because of political reasons. We have seen people that were activists, human rights advocates that have had to leave, and others have had to leave the country because, they were falling prey to the armed forces, and it was basically impossible to continue living. People were in a situation of danger, of constant threats, and they have had to leave. And this has happened repeatedly in rural Colombia and the forgotten Colombia. There are many stories that need to be told. And that's what we have tried to do with our work. Monica was talking earlier about the Guernica bombings, how the civil population also is affected by war, and controlling the lives of individuals, of women, as a way of controlling the territory. It's a war weapon, and this has led many people to flee the country. This has led to massive exile, invisible exile. During the tough years of war at the end of the 90s, many people had to leave the country. They traveled to Ecuador, to Venezuela, and these people have often been invisible. This humanitarian crisis was more visible outside of Colombia. In Colombia, it seemed that it didn't exist, and collecting these testimonies has been a way of learning about the lives of these victims. We have learned a great deal about the history of conflict as well, not only about the personal biographies of the victims, but we have learned about the conflict. And this report can be easily read, it's very user-friendly, it's easy to read, and basically explains very clearly why people had to leave the country because of the armed conflict, others because of the kidnapping, others because their children were recruited. And there's a leader of the organization of disappeared relatives who didn't receive asylum because the authorities didn't believe that a victim could have been forced to exile. And that's something that they didn't understand, the fact that someone had to leave his or her country because he is trying to find a relative. We're talking about relatives of the victims that were forced to exile as well. Exile also gives visibility to the persistence of armed conflict. And we see how even today people are having to leave the country seeking international protection in order to save their lives. And in these dire situations, by listening to their stories, we can understand what still happens in Colombia. Exile allows you to understand the reality of armed conflict, and don't hesitate to read this report, to be moved by it. And there's a chapter that explains the different phases or stages of this conflict. It's a historical overview. The first time that I visited Colombia, many friends told me, "Why do you visit Colombia? It's impossible to understand what happens there." And we often said, well, Colombia is a complex conflict. Not confusing, complex, and we need to move from confusion to complexity. We need to understand its complexity. We have listened to the former guerrilla fighters, and we have listened to their relatives. Many former fighters have been criminalized, have been prosecuted, and have been forced to exile as well. And once I interviewed a unionist from the CUP, and I asked him, "Why did you end in Chile?" And one may think, why is it that a trade unionist from a beer factory ends up, being a victim of an attack and needs to flee the country and ended up in exile in Chile? What does a trade unionist from the beer sector have to do with exile? Well, this unionist, thanks to his work in the trade union, had secured some, rights for his employees, but that beer company was a multinational company that tried to reduce the wages. And this trade unionist told me it's not really just about work rights or labor rights, but the right to live. And this gentleman had to flee his country. He took a bus. He wanted to, end as far away from Colombia as possible. And he ended up in Cali because he was being threatened by the guerrilla. And this is yet another example that illustrates the complexity of the armed conflict. You need to listen to the different stories, to the testimonies. And what are the different routes towards exile? We have analyzed the stories of different victims. You can read this in the report. Some people leave Colombia to Venezuela, then to Brazil, then Argentina. And I remember that we interviewed the director of a national park, a natural reserve, who had to flee the country because of threats. He was in the border between the national park and the indigenous community. It's a cross-border area where coca is cultivated, and he had to flee the country because of constant threats. And he had great difficulty in explaining his children why he had to leave. And he organized a trip to Disneyland, and he tried to explain his children what they were doing. He bought the tickets to fly to Disney, and they crossed the border, and his justification to his children was a trip to Disney, but it was a way of convincing them that they had to leave. And then he sought asylum in Canada. And these are very interesting stories that come to show the different routes of exile. What are we really talking about when we talk about exile? We try to collect all these different stories to understand the complexity. And when we started with this effort, we thought, okay, so many pages have been written on the armed conflict in Colombia. The scholarly world, the NGOs have published many accounts. And when we started writing our report, we thought, well, there's nothing written on exile. There's very, very little literature on exile. There is a report from the University of Los Andes, a very short document, and that was about it. It was seen as a weakness, and for us, this weakness has turned out to be a strength, because we have had to learn about exile by listening to people instead of reading books. Listening to people. This is how we have been able to rebuild a collective story, a collective account. We have learned a great deal during this process, and I encourage you to read the report. We also authored a document called The Living Archaeologies of Exile: Objects Humanize, Loss, Humanize, also loss, pain. And there's this film, a Spanish film that is also very interesting and tries to humanize wars. It's called El Sonajero, Rattle, and we are trying to, through these stories, understand the truth of all these people. And through objects, we can also humanize the story. And I remember listening to some exiles that referred also to some objects that they carry. Objects tell us a story, humanize loss. And we worked on this living archaeologies of exile, what people carried with them when they fled the country, those objects that they hang to, that they cling to, that they hope that they can then return once they go back to the country. Those objects that are like a tie, a connection to their history. There's also a chapter on international protection that basically tells the host countries about the right to asylum. And we see that this story, Exile in Colombia, that seemed to be a story of the past, not only talks about the past, but talks about the present, people that are leaving the country still today. And this points towards an international problem. The other day, I was talking with the director of UNHCR in Colombia, and she was telling me that next year there will be an international conference on asylum. And we have never talked about transitional justice and asylum and how the refugees can be part of these reconstruction processes. This report also talks about two things that are very, very important for us. The impact of exile, to dive into the experience of exiles through their accounts, through their experiences. And in all interviews, there were always two parts. First, what happened in Colombia and why they had to leave, and what happened afterwards. It's like a black hole, an invisible black hole. And the commissioners have started to read about the impacts of exile. And when reading about these stories, they have understood this situation. We're talking about at least 5 million people that have been affected. Some people have had to leave, others have had to face that separation of the relatives that have fled. So, and you need to understand that many people in exile have learned to resist. They had to start from scratch once again. They had to start from basically nothing. They have rebuilt their stories. And you are all experts in this process of reconstruction, of starting from ashes, from scratch. And there is an experience that is very, very important for Colombia. Colombia needs to be also feel moved by this resistance that exists in exile. This report tries to aim to build a bridge with something that has been rendered invisible. And wants to build a bridge through the reconstruction of truth. And we also refer to the right to return. Some people started to return thanks to the peace process. Sometimes because of negative conditions, people have had to return. And we believe that a policy needs to be put in place. And this is linked to one of the recommendations issued in the report. Alejo will tell you about the recommendations of the report. And the report says that exile needs to be recognized. Forced displacement between Bogota and Cucuta is recognized, but other forms of exile aren't recognized. We have found Colombian refugees in the North Pole and in the south of Chile. And this showcases a reality that exists, that has a great deal to say, that needs to be recognized. There is also an agenda for the recommendations of the Commission for the Recognition of Exile that is going to be part of this follow-up committee that will have to work on those recommendations. For the first time, Truth Commission has a formal mechanism to follow up on those recommendations. In this case, it's not just about the recommendations, not just about the outcomes. Now we will pass on the baton to this follow-up committee. And for those of you that have participated in this process, you understand that we need to, of course, ensure a follow-up on the recommendations so that this desire for peace, this willingness to transform the country is realized. This is a desire that exists in Colombia, and hopefully in this report you can find you're also a lever for change, and you identify yourself with these stories, and you see in this report a lever for that change that is so very much needed in the country.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, A warm embrace to my dear colleagues in exile, the victims here in the room, and those that are following us online. I'd like to also thank our colleagues from the best country that have helped us in this adventure, in this endeavor, in this Truth Commission. I'm going to very briefly refer to other contents of this final report. We have 2 of the 10 volumes that we're going to submit. We're going to present them little by little during the month of July in our platform, and in the upcoming months we will start printing the first copies. I'd like to thank Carlos. I'd like to thank Egoa as well for the work done so that today we can formally present these volumes. These 10 volumes aim to respond to the mandate of the Commission, a very bold, ambitious mandate. And there's a volume that is a historical overview of the armed conflict. The Truth Commission established that 1958 was the most emblematic year, and from then onwards we started trying to shed light on the situation to clarify the truth. We are the outcome of a peace agreement signed in the year 2016. Our Truth Commission doesn't close the armed conflict, and we have also analyzed some factors for the persistence of the armed conflict, and the recommendations are geared towards how we can address those persistence factors. This historic overview is a historic and political overview that reviews the timeline, what happens with each government, and basically refers to the main milestones, peace, war, throughout a series of decades. And the hypothesis is that in Colombia there is a war that is being waged by the political powers. There is a combination between arms and politics, and there are economic reasons as well. Land also is part of the conflict, as you know. There's a second volume that refers to violations of human rights, breaches, violations of humanitarian rights, and also refers to responsibilities in an armed conflict with millions of victims. We're talking about millions of facts. About everything you can imagine happened. This volume basically sheds light on the most relevant figures in terms of violations of human rights, and is very much based on victims' testimonies. It's a highly testimonial volume, and the stories of the victims translates pain, suffering, trauma into figures so that we can understand the violations committed by all the stakeholders throughout the years, and basically walks us through those facts. And then there's a territorial volume. Colombia is a country made up of regions, and violence has been experienced differently depending on the region we're talking about. The situation varies enormously, from one region to another. The armed presence of the different actors also varies a great deal, and the Commission wanted to analyze the territory, the specificities of each territory. And we have 11 territorial studies as part of this volume, and each territory is described during 200 pages that tries to analyze the timeline of the armed conflict and analyze what happened in each region. And you need to understand that Aside from these territorial analysis, there is an analysis on the impact of armed conflict in big major cities. We've also analyzed the specificities of the impact of armed conflict in cities as opposed to more rural areas. And I'd also like to underscore that there is another part of the volume on peasants. We had long conversation, long talks about this, and we understood that we had to analyze the specific situation of peasants, of farmers, in order to understand their reality and to do justice to those farmers, those peasants in rural areas that have been extremely victimized. And in the fourth place, there's a chapter that we have titled Voices, Testimonies. These are just exclusively testimonies. There's a one-page intro to this chapter that then collects testimonies. And you need to really let go so that you can feel moved by the voices of those victims, of the perpetrators. And this is basically an invitation to understand that Colombia needs to be, interpreted with humanity, and it's very important that you understand that we have listened very actively to all these people. And the structure is quite interesting. We haven't classified testimonies depending on the type of victims or of human rights violations. We have structured the testimonies in a very original manner. These are very moving, touching stories that we have wanted to collect.
Un volumen.
Fifth, we have a volume dedicated to how the armed conflict affected the ethnic peoples in Colombia. We think that's a central capital issue. Colombia has an Afro population that is quite representative, around 14-15% of Colombia's descent from Africa. And there's a large percentage of indigenous peoples. So this looks at the armed conflict in relation to indigenous peoples, Afro peoples, what we call the root people from San Andres and the Caribbean, or the Palenquero people, that are communities of Afros dating back to the conquest, who declared their autonomy in some regions. And it also refers to the Gypsy people. So this covers the violations, the violation of collective rights, the impacts, what the strategic corridors were in the ethnic territories used by the armed actors, and significant emphasis was put on this. There's another chapter that refers to women and LGBT people, and a major effort was made there to also recognize LGBT people. And I think that this is perhaps the first Truth Commission that was able to develop this subject in depth. And this chapter is emphasis is put on sexual violence, and LGBT people suffered or particularly suffered this kind of violation. And there are testimonies of women and LGBTI people are running through it. And this is a way of explaining what happened to them. We have another volume that refers to the impact, confrontation, and resistance. In other words, first of all, what were the consequences, the effects caused by the armed conflict in the lives of people? Obviously, this is from a psychosocial point of view, individual impacts, family impacts, collective impacts, but we also refer to economic impacts and environmental impacts caused by the armed conflict. And the second part attempts to show that although war is bad, ugly, It causes pain, trauma, sadness. At times in war, people resist and get organized. It's what we've called the positive transformations. So this refers to individual coping. What did people do? Some people resorted to religion. People reinvent themselves in incredible ways. And Colombians, fortunately, have always been very original in finding a way forward. And it shows the more organizational forms of resistance. And the war has served to consolidate very important peace movements, for example. It's also generated relevant social leadership. And an example is our future Vice President of the Republic. It has also facilitated the creation of a very relevant human rights defense movement. So it's also good to show how positive things in civil society manage to move forward. And we have the exile chapter that Carlos already discussed. And we have this volume that we originally called the synthesis volume, and finally called it the findings volume. There's a bit of a design problem here, and I think it could have looked more like Carlos's. And this is double space, and his is single space. This one is easier to read. And all the members of the Commission worked collectively on this. Each chapter had one member of the Commission leading the various chapters. Carlos led the exile chapter. I worked on the violations chapter. And here all 11 of us took part in the writing. 11 is like a soccer team. So it's complicated. It was complicated, wasn't it, Carlos? It was hard work to produce this volume. But we tried to include the major true statements, the harsh things we wanted to say about the armed conflict. So more than a summary, as the name says, it's the findings. The nuts and bolts of our report, the core, starting with a chapter that we've called The Wounded Colombia, that is recognizing how the conflict in particular affected the civil population. And we found that in Colombia, out of 10 people, 9 civilians were affected during the armed conflict. And these impacts, these psychosocial impacts, individual impacts, family impacts, have torn our country asunder. And this can be seen not only in Colombia, but also abroad. And that's why I think that the chapter Exile is important to understand it. And then there are some relevant analyses based on armed actors. There's a chapter on the insurgency of guerrilla groups. There's a chapter on the paramilitary. There's another one dedicated to the security model and also to drug trafficking. We wanted to take a look at these actors and wanted to underscore drug trafficking. For us, drug trafficking is a political actor in the Colombian armed conflict, and it's good to show up that role. It was a political actor. And it runs incredibly deep. And we started to dig and started to look at the parapolitics in the 70s. And we found senators from the Caribbean, from the Atlantic coast that were involved. And at the beginning of the 80s, they were prosecuted for being involved in marijuana, contraband, etc. So the para policies didn't come from the end of the 90s. It dates back to the 60s and 70s. So it's very relevant. So we have these references to the armed actors. We also have a section on impunity, which for us is highly relevant. Obviously, impunity is a persistence factor related to the conflict, the armed conflict. And we also take a sort of X-ray of the territorial reconfiguration. In other words, how the armed conflict reshaped the territories. This is a reflection from the regions, and we end this section with the subject of peace culture. If I can have 5 minutes to discuss the recommendations, because the recommendations are the future. It's where we point to the future. We make it systematic. And I apologize for the expression, but we want to be bolder and generate a greater debate around security and drug trafficking. In security, we're very emphatic when we point out that Colombia needs a security model that is aimed at peace. We don't want security for war anymore. And we have to make very substantial changes with regard to our military forces. The military forces in Colombia are untouchable. They have been untouchable. They haven't been changed. And they weren't modified in the 1991 Constitution or the 2016 peace agreement. But we need a different security model, thinking more about human security. So there we have an important package. And there, as I said, we want to generate a discussion as a state entity. And we believe we have all the legitimacy to do so. And regarding drug trafficking, we believe that we also have to go towards a paradigm shift and regulate drug trafficking. In other words, it's legalization. And the international cooperation model should be changed in the fight against drugs. This model, a very international model, hasn't been helpful to stop drug trafficking, and spraying have increased the crops. The coca-producing farmer has been criminalized excessively, and we have to change that paradigm regarding drug trafficking. And you'll find other recommendations regarding territorial peace, a peace culture, a more inclusive democracy, very important recommendations in relation to impunity and for peace building, to strengthen both the peace agreement and other measures related to reparation and care for victims. And with this truth, we hope that we'll have a more human future for our country. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias a los dos.
Thank you both very much. The work is very extensive. There's a lot of passion behind the work. And people say that when a book is published, it no longer belongs to the author. And in representation of all the members of the Commission, we would like to ask you to let go of the work done, because it's time to hand over this report to the regional minister who's with us. But before that, I would like to ask our colleagues to join you on stage, because we're saying that this has been a collective job, and there are some people that I'm going to ask to come up. Let's see how we can do this, organize the chairs. But I would like to ask Liseth Alvarez from the LGTBI collective from the Denmark node, Marta Histriosa from the UK node, Jose Goyas, an indigenous testimonialist from the Basque node, Juan Sebastián Vargas from the France node second generation, Doris Ardila from the Catalonia node belonging to the new monitoring committee, Silvia Plana, technical secretary for the nodes of Europe, Claudia Alejandra Sepúlveda, the host today from the Basque Node, and Alejandro Quincena, the coordinator of the international region. This is also a way of making the work team visible. And I hope that you're also watching this on your screens. And we're not going to hand over all these volumes to one regional minister. It would be a bit hard to handle. But we would like Beatriz Artolazabal, the regional minister for equality and social policy, who's going to receive these 2 volumes. And I don't know whether this is going to be a solemn event. Oh, you already have it. I'll leave these volumes here. So if you could please hand over the report, which is more than just a testimonial. It's a recognition of all the work that's been done.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. That summary volume and the exile chapter has just been handed over to the regional minister. Thank you very much to the whole group and for the regional minister. And for not just being the custodian, but also for making sure that this is further developed. Thank you very much.
Ahora, vale, barkatu. Jaun Andreak, hemen Bizkaia aretoan zaude.
These opening words are in Basque again. We were waiting for her to switch to Spanish. For me, it's a real honor to receive the final report from the Commission for the clarification of truth, coexistence and non-repetition in Colombia. It's a very important day and it's a very exciting day. And as Regional Minister for Equality, Justice and Social Policies, responsible for the human rights policies, memory and cooperation of the Basque government, and especially representing symbolically a whole country, its institutions, and the organizations of civil society and NGOs. Back to Basque again.
Hauesek nire gaurko hitzen irismena. Agradecer, reconocer.
I'd like to thank, recognize and strengthen our commitment. And this is the meaning of my words today. I would like to thank the Commission for their work and for being the first European country where an event of this type is carried out. I would also like to thank all those people, organizations and entities that have taken part in this process, and many of which are here today. The Basque node supporting the Commission for Truth in Colombia and the various nodes set up around Europe, the EGOA Institute, the organizations that make up the Colombia panel, Lanquidecha, the Basque Cooperation Agency, and the Department for Human Rights, Victims and Diversity of the Basque Government, and also a long etc. of associations, entities and individuals that have helped us do this magnificent work.
Prozesua laguntzen eta bultzatzen. Guztiok izango gara eta izango gara beharrezko. Ha sido un verdadero esfuerzo.
It's been a true collective effort. We have all made our contribution to support this process. We have all been necessary and will continue to be necessary. And above all, we have to recognize the work done by this Truth Commission, a hard, intensive job full of difficulties and hurdles, not free from pressures and threats. A rigorous, methodological, serious, profound, brave, free and independent job. Members of the Commission, Carlos, Alejandro, a million thanks for your work and for your presentation here today. Thanks for your contribution, and thanks for showing us the path towards peace and justice.
Colombia. Axola zaigu Colombia. Min ematen digu Colombia. Itxaropenez begiratu nahi diogu Kolombiako etorkizun berriari. Colombia es un país especial.
Colombia is a special country for the Basque Country. We care about Colombia. Colombia hurts us. We look with hope at the new future of Colombia. This room reflects our feelings today. The institutions, entities, and the NGOs have always tried to translate this intangible link into tangible commitments. Commitments in cooperation, commitments in defending human rights, commitments with the most vulnerable communities, and also commitments with the work done by the Truth Commission. In the Basque Country, we've tried to support this work, especially regarding the collection of testimonies in exile. Colombia, outside Colombia. 2048 testimonies, 804 in Europe. Pioneer research studies to make visible the invisible experience of thousands of Colombians that had to leave their country to defend their lives as a result of the armed conflict. Testimonies that speak to us of pain, of suffering, of resilience, of radically affected lives, victims of a forced exile, that need justice, recognition, reparation, and non-repetition. The report gives us a diagnosis and a chapter of conclusions and recommendations for non-repetition. A diagnosis that goes to the root cause of the problems of the Colombian armed conflict, its causes, responsibilities, and consequences. And a diagnosis that puts forward the major challenges, pending challenges, challenges for the present and future, and the proliferation of armed groups, the reincorporation of ex-combatants, violations of human rights in the territories, illegal crops and drug trafficking, the access to land and the integrated rural reform, the illegal extraction industry and environmental deterioration, inequality, the discrimination of indigenous Afro-peasant communities, the lack of opportunities for young people, a diagnosis and a roadmap. Back to Basque again.
Tasunean, aitormenean eta eskubideetan oinarritutako bakea. Indarkeriarik ezean eta elkarrizketan oinarritutako bakea. Giza eskubidea eta justizia sozialen oinarritutako bakea. Adiskidetzean eta elkarbizitzan oinarritutako bakea. Memoria duen etorkizuna. Elkarbizitza helburua duen memoria. Hauxe da bidea. La paz es posible.
Peace is possible. A peace to be based on truth and dignity, recognition, the rights of victims. There's a future if there's truth, about dialogue and non-violence, about human rights and social justice, about reconciliation and coexistence in diversity. A future with a memory for coexistence, and this is the only path. The path for Colombia and the path for all of us, and we know that well here in the Basque Country, where for decades we have suffered the experience of terrorism and political violence. Building peace must be a sincere collective effort that can only be based on ethical and democratic principles and values.
Zia fisikoaren gainetik milaka harik lotzen gaituzte. Iraganak, orainak eta geroak batzen gaituzte. Bake nahia batzen gaitu. Nos separan un océano.
We're separated by 8,000 kilometers of ocean, but we have an enormous number of links. We're linked through the past, the present, and the future. We're linked by our commitment to a just peace. May this symbol be the symbol of a new future for Colombia. And I'll finish. But I don't want to finish without repeating the special significance of this July 6th, a special day for all of us, and a very special day for you, Carlos. It's been 4 very tough, intense years, especially in these past months as coordinator of the final report. You haven't had any time off, any rest, and no respite. But we'd like to say, Carlos, loud and clear, it's been worth it. And that's why today, on this very special day, on this day of your birthday, apart from saying a sincere happy birthday, we would like to say congratulations, Carlos.
Esto es celebrar a lo grande.
Quite a celebration.
Sorionak.
Le quiero entregar esto a Carlos, los que fuimos a Colombia.
Vamos a hacerle un favor.
We're going to do him a favor because I'm not wearing glasses, but I can see his suffering, and it's not over yet. But let's give him a bit of a rest, although I've been told that we have some more surprises. But thank you very much, Regional Minister. It's a good surprise, don't worry. Thank you very much for those words of support. It's a support which, as we've said from the beginning, international society has responded to this call to participate and form part of the resolution, the understanding and the channeling of this conflict. And there are other European countries that also wanted to show their presence today. Thanks to our online streaming and thanks to some videos we've received, we're going to see a group of ambassadors from the European countries that wanted to be here today, this 6th of July, sharing this special day. So if it's ready, let's watch it.
Agradezco a la Comisión de la Verdad por la invitación.
I would like to thank the Truth Commission for inviting us to take part in this event, delivering the final report. Our commitment as a British government and our mission in Colombia to build peace has been evoked in guaranteeing victims their right to truth, justice, reparation and non-repetition. During these years, we have followed the hard and committed work done by the group of volunteers in the nodes in Europe, but we have followed it closely. And today, this is for you. And we hope that this report will be the starting point to build a stable and long-lasting peace, where victims will continue to be the center of this process. Our commitment is still there, and we know there's a lot to be done. Today we join in this mission of the Commission of Truth with a vision of the future that will enable us to continue to build a country in peace. Thank you very much.
A pocos días de la presentación del informe final.
We're about to present the final report of the Truth Commission that will be tabled on the 28th of June. Switzerland has been accompanying the Commission during the past 3.5 years. And as the ambassador of Switzerland to Colombia, I've been able to see firsthand the efforts done in order to carry out a very broad and participatory process. This report collects a plurality of voices, and the presentation of this report is a very important milestone, but much work needs to be done. The international community understands that truth commissions play a very important role in reconstruction, but there's also accompaniment, pedagogy that needs to be done in order to make sure that recommendations are implemented. We invite all Colombians to welcome this report and to see the recommendations as an opportunity to continue to build a democratic and peaceful country. Thank you. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all. It's my pleasure to join you today virtually to address some words regarding the presentation of the final report in Bilbao. First, I'd like to congratulate the Truth Commission for the incredible work they have done in the many hearings held and summarizing the conclusions in the final report. This represents a major contribution to reconciliation and non-repetition. This wouldn't have been possible without the participation of victors and perpetrators. Accepting the past means that we need to listen to all voices, every single voice. This includes the voice of the exiles that had to flee the country as a result of the armed conflict in order to protect their lives. Their stories have been invisible until now, so it's I'm very satisfied to see that the Truth Commission has made their lives at last visible. Germany has taken very long to acknowledge it and recognize its own past. And for Colombia, it's easier to address this generational endeavor, even though we're very far away. I believe that Colombia is very much on track, and now it's high time to consolidate this process and to apply the recommendations in order to maintain the legacy of the Truth Commission. Germany will continue to support this exemplary process. Thanks very much for your attention.
Me dicen que el embajador.
I'm being told that Spain's ambassador to Colombia, Joaquín Arostig, is following us live. They have just sent me a video. He's following us live. Thanks very much for joining us, Ambassador. And these people on screen have recognized the work that has been done. We have been listening to other authorities, for example, MPs that have recognized this effort, and we're going to show you a video now where you can see them taking the floor. Hello, good afternoon, welcome.
Rights to address you today in Bilbao in Spain, and to welcome the international launch of the Colombian Commission for the Clarification of Truth, Coexistence and Non-Repetition's final report. I have been following the Commission's progress for many years and wholeheartedly commend your work. We look forward to seeing the report's conclusions implemented in a way that is supportive of the continued peace process and in a way that progresses human rights across Colombian society. The Commission's report offers a real chance to move forward from the conflict's legacy and into an era of continued peace process in Colombia. The conversations, interviews and engagement that took place as part of the report's development were far-reaching, both in terms of subject matter and physical distance. We salute the bravery of every single individual in Colombia and abroad who has contributed to this process, often at great personal risk to themselves. This report gives a voice to the victims and survivors in Colombia, to the international Colombian community. The Commission's report presents a strong opportunity for the progression of these values in Colombia. I know that, together, both Scotland and Colombia can play our part in securing the rule of law and human rights across the world.
Hello, I'm Bishop Joseph Toll, the Bishop of Motherwell in Scotland, and one of the countries we've been involved in for many years and take a great interest in is Colombia. And I was fortunate enough to make a visit there with SCIAF just at the time the peace process had reached its climax and the treaty was agreed. So I've got a particular interest in what has happened since then. It's been particularly good to hear of the work of the Truth Commission and to know that it's ready now to present its report and to put forward its recommendations, which have encouraged a reconciliation between those who were enemies before, and also recording what happened to so many people, both those at home, those now in exile in other countries. So I commend the work of the Commission and hope and pray that its effects will be good, and it may lead to lasting peace for people in Colombia, be a good example to others in other parts of the world.
In April, I visited Colombia as part of a parliamentary delegation. We were there to meet human rights defenders, Indigenous and Afro-Colombian community leaders, and representatives of wider civil society. Their hugely important report will be comprehensive, wide-ranging and challenging, and it will shine a light into Colombia's past and into areas where many may not want a light to be shone. And as a result, many individuals and organisations will be upset but what it will say about the role they played in the past 6 decades of violence. But if Colombia is to move on as one and in peace, then these legacy issues have to be addressed, however painful that may be, because not to address them now will mean that they will linger and they will fester and they will undoubtedly return. I'm absolutely certain, however, that the international community will stand in solidarity with the new Colombian government in implementing the findings of the Truth Commission and in charting a new path for Colombia. I'm equally certain that the people of Colombia, those human rights defenders, those indigenous and Afro-Colombian community leaders, and all the representatives of wider civil society we met will support their government every step of the way in implementing the Truth Commission's report and in building that new Colombia and that long-lasting, sustainable peace.
Personas que no han podido hacer.
Well, these are people that wanted to send their testimony because they couldn't make it in person. Now I'd like to address someone who joins us virtually. Maria Ubilerna Sanabria. Ubita. We're talking with you, Ubita. For you, we wanted Ubita to be here with us today because we wanted to bring the voice of exile. She was invited to join us. And you may ask yourself, why her? Well, because Ubita is one of these women that had to leave with Maleta Colombiana, who denounced the false positives of the Colombian army. She had to go to exile, and some hours ago she left her home in order to travel to Bilbao to join us today to tell us about her jump into the void when she left Soacha, a neighborhood in Bogota, and traveled to cold Sweden. But unfortunately, Iberia, the airline, has considered that the document that credits her international protection status is not enough to be able to travel to Bilbao. Ubita, who doesn't speak English nor Swedish, and unfortunately, she was unable to exercise her right to come here. So unfortunately, not even here in Europe she's able to exercise her rights. Last night we learned about this situation, and we thought, what can we do? Should we find someone else to share his or her testimony? And we thought we shouldn't do that. The fact that an airline decides to do the migratory control is not by chance, but this is part of a system that sometimes tramples on people. And unfortunately, our colleague wasn't able to travel. So Ubita is not present here today, but she is symbolically, and Ubita is speaking loud and clear. And this story comes to show what exile is about, a reality that is very close to the hearts of everybody in this room, that is close to the hearts of Basques and all societies. All societies have gone through this. Exile is a non-place, a non-time, as Carlos was saying. And then it's a human dimension. We're talking about seeking protection, about forced diaspora, but this is not synonymous of dignified life. Thanks very much, Ubita.
Por lo tanto, Ubita,
Therefore, Ubita, thanks again for speaking loud and clear, for being present. We miss your warm embrace, but we hereby receive your strength, your testimony. We would like to thank you for your experience, and We feel very much moved and touched by your experience, and experience shared by the more than 2,000 people listened by the Truth Commission of Colombia. These are the stories recorded in the report. Carlos, we're going to ask you to give us more details together with your team regarding the content of this report. And we're talking about Ubita's presence and non-presence that helps us give yet a new dimension to exile.
Bueno, arratsalde.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, to engage in a dialogue with Marta, Juan Sebastián, Lisette, José Goyes. Each of them have participated in this process in their own way, have given us their testimony. Some of them have taken testimonies as well, have listened to others, and this is an invitation to engage in a dialogue with all of them regarding what this experience have meant for them. They have shared their stories. There's a subjective, an individual, and a collective dimension. Sometimes you take a testimony in exile. Many victims that had never spoken have somehow relived the nightmare, return to the place where things happened, to that fear. It's returning to that situation, right? They have been key actors, they're good friends, and this is going to be a conversation without a script so that our colleagues can share their stories with the people in the room and with people connected. We have many notes in the United States and Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Panama, Venezuela, Ecuador. Greetings to all these notes of support and to the people that are following us online. Perhaps, Marta, you want to kick it off? Could you please explain your experience participating in this process and what this moment in time represents? Because we're starting, a new journey or new part of the journey. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all the participants in the room and those that are listening to us online. There are so many people I feel very grateful for. I'd like to thank the commissioners for the hard work done. I'd like to thank the notes. I'd like to thank the interviewers. I'd like to thank the victims, the survivors, the migrants, the refugees, the exiles. What has this meant for me? For the International Bureau and for the Black people, basically this experience has helped us give visibility to the reality experienced by the indigenous people, the Afro community, the peasants that share territory. We have basically showcased the pain, the suffering. Of course, we cannot cover all the topics, all the victims, but this is a beginning. One first step. Of course, this will help us pave the way. This will help us make headway. And we've been able to record the situation of victims. We've seen how victims have suffered the scourge of war. And those that have suffered structural racism and also the neglect and that has suffered exile. We who have suffered wealth of violations, and those that have suffered the most have been the indigenous people, black people, peasants in our territories. We have been left to the side, we have been discriminated in Colombia. And when we leave Colombia, fortunately, we also suffer dual discrimination also in our host countries. White migrant is different to a black migrant or a black refugee. Black exile is different to a white exile. The way we live, the way we experience life in the territories is also very different. Our life is different to the lives of the citizens in our host cities. For us, black people, peasants, indigenous, well, our wealth is our rivers, our mountains, our habits, our practices, the way we organize our communities. We have our own way of solving our conflicts. We have our savoir-faire, which we want to share with the world, with other societies, so that others respect us and don't see us just as figures, so that we are, well, duly considered and recognized. And in the process of the Truth Commission, we have been engaged. This has been a short process, and we hope that the upcoming years we will be able to continue working hard so that our ways of resisting, our ways of living are recognized. We want to show you that we have our own intelligence, that we are capable, and that those of us that are living in exile have acquired new knowledge, new skills, and that we then want to use in order to nurture our country. We are a very important team of professionals. In only 2 months, we at the ethnical table have been able to draft a report that we have then tabled to the Truth Commission. And in this report, we record very sad testimonies, very painful testimonies. We harbor hope, and we have wanted to showcase our wealth, our values, our practices. We want our ways of living, of engaging with nature to be recognized. Ladies, gentlemen, we are those that are in the territories while cultivating the land, producing food, looking after the rivers. I don't want to expand much further. My colleague, former guerrilla fighter from the FARC, is in the room as well. He had something that really touched me. He said, my colleague, that in the territories, because of the complexity of war, well, many secrets are carried to the grave. And this is something that we all know a great deal about. We also know, however, that love is possible. And we've seen how, even in situations of war, well, sometimes love prevails. We have been caught in an absurd, a long-standing war that has left us scarred, forever scarred. Marta, for those of you that don't know her, has been working with the Truth Commission from the very beginning in the United Kingdom. She has recorded many testimonies. She was able to contact with other exiles in the UK. She has listened to other women, other Afro descendants in the UK and in Europe. She was able to build trust among women. Lisette Alvarez has shared her testimony from the Danish node, a very small node that has been very active. Lisette is a trans colleague, woman, that has participated in all the different scenarios opened by the Commission from encounter number 1. Lisette, you have the floor. Thanks very much, Carlos. Greetings, everybody. Greetings, everybody in the room and in my motherland in Colombia. I was born in Cali, Colombia. I'm a trans woman. I live in exile outside my home country for more than 30 years already. What does a trans woman have to do with such a big city with Cali and armed conflict? This is a fight, this is a struggle that I myself have had to face here abroad, so that people would understand that my situation, my reality is very much linked to what happened there. And I had to convey a clear message to my family there as well, so that they could understand how everything that happened to us joined us, and we're all committed to finding a solution. The words you have presented, the report, well, the Commission earlier talked about a war. Of course, we all suffered a war, and war is the ultimate realization of those adverse realities that a society faces. We have been listening that war in Colombia is being seen in terms of a conflict, and I like to say that these adverse social realities are representations of a lack of opportunities to be able to carry out our life projects, to be able to blossom. There is a lack of institutionalization. We don't have a government that accompanies us and helps us live decent, dignified life. And what I like to say, I like to draw everybody's attention on the fact that there are, of course, wars, Bellic episodes, and the report, of course, focuses on these war episodes, but we also need to reflect on the economic dimension or the social or race dimension. And you need to understand that there are many different adverse realities. And last, I'd like to share with you my thoughts. When we talk about armed conflict in Colombia, this term is a bit restrictive, because for those that are outside Colombia, well, people outside Colombia believe that the armed conflict is not addressing those adverse social realities. Those adverse social realities made me flee the country, made me, travel to Europe. And I myself wanted to participate in the Commission for the Clarification of Truth, basically to showcase those adverse social realities. I wanted to give a name to what I had experienced, give it a name, to name it, and also to attach also words to the feelings, to the emotions that I felt. And what happened to me? Well, basically, I felt that I was outside society, that I belonged to a group of people, trans people, that were excluded from society, that could be punished socially because of who we are. And this, of course, made me feel pain. It made me feel completely unprotected. It made me feel that I didn't belong. It made me feel lonely. And I lost my citizenship, my Colombian citizenship. The testimony that I shared with the Commission for the Clarification of Truth opened up this scar. And when opened this scar, of course, I had to start a process of healing. This process of healing, well, happened little by little, thanks to the support of all the members of the Commission. And I'd like to mention my fellow colleagues from Intermodal de Género, who always gave me a helping hand, conveying me, sharing me, well, helping me move forward, helping me. And what I'm sharing with you individually can be contextualized in the Cali of the 90s, when drug trafficking in Cali, the Cali cartel, wanted to be accepted by society. And basically it engaged all the institutions of the city of Cali, including religious organizations. What we didn't understand was that, well, suddenly a social cleansing program was underway, and for the people of Cali, well, the title was Cali Linda, Cali Limpia, beautiful Cali, clean Cali. But what we didn't understand was that during the nights there were vans out in the streets, disappearing people out in the streets in Cali. And among them, many trans women were disappeared just because they belonged to those adverse social realities.
Afrontar todo esto es sacar fuerzas.
Coping with this means finding strength in the Macondo creativity, finding strength in the roots of Antioquia, having faith in that we can cope with all these emotions I mentioned earlier resiliently. And that healing continues by recognizing the efforts I made. And finally, healing for me meant recovering my dignity as a Colombian citizen. Because being a Colombian citizen is dignified. It's dignified to be a Colombian citizen. Thank you.
Gracias, Lisette.
Thank you, Lisette, for showing us what Cali is, a different Cali that needs you, not a Cali that excludes you and kills you. Often, listening to many testimonies, we wonder, what would Colombia be like with all these people living in Colombia? And I think your testimony speaks a lot to that. José Goyes is an indigenous leader from one of the regions with the greatest mobility, the greatest level of organization, and the greatest level of conflict, violence, and war. And one of the first testimonies that I had the honor of listening to. José. Good afternoon to everyone. Brothers and sisters, the people from the Basque government, the Colombian government, and particularly the people from the Truth Commission, I think it's worthwhile emphasizing that as indigenous people, we normally wouldn't have met with a government commission because there had always been friction, unfulfilled agreements, and a lot of other things that still happen. However, with the Truth Commission, we have felt so safe and secure to give our testimony and participate, and it's very pleasant for me to be here today talking about our experience, our testimonies to the Truth Commission. And I form part of the War and Peace panel. We've been working on the truth process, and we need to continue to add things, because although the Havana Agreement was signed, the Colombian conflict still persists. And I think that on the same scale, or worse than before, the peace agreement, with a large number of armed groups that are attacking from north to south. And I think it's necessary for the Commission or the people in charge of monitoring the truth should continue their efforts. Because we look forward to peace. But peace isn't just putting down some rifles or signing an agreement and carrying it out. Peace should be a final and solid solution to the structural problems that lead to mobilizations and conflict in Colombia. When there are real guarantees that the government defends life and fundamental rights, and the application of fundamental rights, and if we can live with dignity, then peace will come into all our hearts. That day, peace will come. When the problems are truly solved, and not like now, we're the third Latin American country in suffering acute hunger. It's incredible. I would also like to regret the lack of support of the Colombian government to the Truth Commission with regard to logistic economic support, accompaniment. I think, rather than that, it has suffered indiscriminate attacks. And in my case, it has also ended up being a victim after doing such a beautiful job of clarifying the truth. And I'm sure that they will also be threatened and face severe danger, the same as those of us that are in exile. It's worth pointing out that the Afro-Colombians and the indigenous peoples have been the last to be recognized by the Constitution. The indigenous peoples became human beings in 1991 because the 99 law on savages meant that we continue to be savages. And the same for the Afro-Colombians from the Pacific. The Caribbeans were also left outside the Constitution. On an international level, we have the ILO agreement ratified by Spain to protect ethnic groups. And this is an important tool we can use to strengthen our customs and way of life. I think that the armed conflict continues, and we have to continue with our work. We are grateful to the support of the Basque government and all the governments that have supported this process, and we will continue to work. The seed has been planted by the Commission, and as today the harvest is being handed over, I hope that we will come to a happy end with truth, justice, reparation, and non-repetition. This would be our dream, to ultimately obtain peace. Thank you very much.
Un día, gracias José, ¿no? Un día trabajando con los...
Thank you. Working with the indigenous peoples, they told me that war could be summarized like a rugby match. And I said, and who's playing the match? Well, it's the team of life playing against the team of death. That's the struggle. And I asked, and what's the ball? What do they play with? And they said, the ball is the land. But we not only resist war, we also resist because we have a life project. And there was a discussion with your community, the Cauca, in the north of Cauca, as to what in the constitution was called development project, how it could be translated. And there was no way of translating development into the Nasa language. And they said the real translation would be life project. And that's how we also learn from the Afro and indigenous communities, because languages speak about ourselves and not the rigid categories that we sometimes use. Thank you, Jose, and also thanks to the Consul of Colombia. And it's important for him to have come. Greetings, we welcome you. And among the testimonies we also have the second generation. The second generation is like second class, and it isn't second class. It's young people that sometimes were born here. Sometimes they came when they were small. Sometimes they came in their mother's womb, and they've had to grow up between two worlds. A world that they talk to them about, but which they have never known. And where there hasn't been room to talk about what happened. Well, we have Juan Sebastián with us. Welcome, Juan Sebastián Vargas. He's the son of a very well-known Colombian case, highly forgotten and highly stigmatized in Colombia. But he's also had the courage of participating in this collective project. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm not a politician. I'm not part of a node. But I'm going to try to explain myself the best I can. I met the Commission through my father, who is an exile. And he started to tell me about the process. And that for him it was a chance to clean his name. And to do justice, although this is of no legal value as I understood it. I grew up with a lot of fragments from the history of my father. I was born and raised in Paris. And there was always a lot of silence around all this. And they'd say, when you go to Colombia, don't say much about what happened. I didn't know much about what had happened, but they told me not to talk about it. And talking to my dad about the Commission, I felt like joining him in the process. But for me, at the beginning, it was a matter of providing a raw material. I give you my testimony, and you can do what you like with it. I never felt I'd have to go through the stage fright of having to speak here. I think that the Commission process has helped us in a very personal way. It became a sort of communication channel with my father. He'd speak to me more about the past, and he was doing research. I'm sorry, I lost my thread. So little by little, I felt that this was a structure. Then they took my testimony for 2 hours. I'd never spoken about my life for 2 hours before. It was with Catherine and Liliana, who aren't here. They were very nice and helped me speak out. And I realized that I was carrying something too. Even if they don't talk about it, pain is passed on and it's present. And then there was the event here in Bilbao. And with people from the second generation. And something very special, very nice happened. Very close ties were created with all those people. We have a WhatsApp group. Some of us met in Paris. And it was almost like a new family, although I knew some of them since I was a kid. But after going through this experience, something very special happened. What else did I have to say? Something else the Commission has given me is the feeling that everything I felt as a child is more legitimate, and that I form part of Colombia, of the history of this country, and this isn't too clear for some Colombians. You believe you're French, but that's not the case. And I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sebastian. Thanks to all of you, because you've shown the Commission a great deal. We've learned a great deal during the process. So thank you for the genuine testimonies you've given of your history. And the commitment is to carry on. We had a meeting with the second generation here in Bilbao. And the first generation was in one room and the second generation was in another room. And there was a dialogue, and José was in the second generation room with others, with the young people, and Sebastian was also there. As soon as the young people started talking, they soon identified with each other, with their different stories. And I think that they've also taught the older generation to break their silence. People would say, I lived in a house where there was always a dark room that you couldn't talk about. And I think that the young people have taught us, and they've broken that silence that didn't let them be what they were. and didn't let the rest of us be what we are. So thank you for all of that. I'd like to introduce somebody. Some of you already know this person. You know that there's going to be a follow-up committee at the Commission for the first time. Truth Commissions in general end their mandate when they present their report. This Commission has a follow-up committee made up of 7 people that are going to work for 7 years during 2 presidential periods to follow up the recommendations of the Commission. And there was a discussion at the Commission with these 7 people, and we presented several people from exile. One person from exile was chosen as part of that follow-up committee, and that's also important for us, so that we will be able to accompany them in that process, accompany the work of the Commission from the exile. Her name is Doris Ardila. She's a very dear friend, and she's here. I'm going to ask her to stand so that at least you can say hello to her.
Bueno, listo. Ella tiene que leer todos los informes.
She has to read all the reports now to catch up. Well, it's a very good opportunity, and it's a way of following up on the work of the Commission. I think it will be very positive for everyone. Well, I would also like to thank Sylvia, who has formed part of the technical secretariat. Also Claudia, who always hides and is over here. There are other people from the team. Here's Alejandro, representing the whole group. And greetings to the people from America that are listening from Colombia. It's a pleasure, and it gives us hope for this country. I think that we all have a lot of work to do. The report is a tool for change. It's not just looking back, it's also looking forward, and I hope it will give us the possibility of continuing with that transformational conversation, because violence continues in Colombia, that we have to keep working on the peace process in Colombia. And this is a demand that is still made from people in exile and by people who are still leaving the country because of the conflict. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Muchísimas gracias por vuestros testimonios, por ayudarnos a seguir entendiendo, por...
Thank you for helping us to understand and for wanting to learn more. And Doris, who has to read the whole report, I've been told that on the website, on Transmedia, you can download it all very easily. And this is also for you. Carlos has told us that it's not confusing, it's complex. It's very extensive. And you can download it directly from this website. And it's going to be much more convenient to be able to download all these volumes we've heard about today. Well, we're coming to the end, but we're going to do it with another language, with another way of storytelling and not keeping silent through art. Valentina Parra Delgadillo won the most important Colombian annual music festival, the Mono Núñez Festival, and she's come to remind us that Colombia is much more than war, that Colombia is hope. It's something that's ours, both in Colombia and in the Colombia outside Colombia, and that keeps the flame lit for peace and change. And we're going to listen to Valentina Parra Delgadillo.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. The fact is that I fell in love with Colombian music since I was smaller, when I was about 9. And whenever I had the opportunity of going to festivals, they always asked, why Andes music from Colombia? And they'd say, that music is for old people. But I feel something in it. I feel something in that music that allows us to convey, to tell, and over time I was able to understand that Andes music from Colombia enables us to tell the stories of our people, their feelings, and that's why I would like to share some of that Colombian music with you, starting with a beautiful number composed by Luz Marina Posada. And this song follows the bambuco rhythm, and its title is Walkers.
Fallas técnicas.
Technical problems.
A veces suele pasar, ya como que estoy acostumbrada.
It happens. I'm kind of used to it. It happens at festivals sometimes, but it ends up working all right. We're talking about resistance. Yes, resistance. Also hope, patience.
Las montañas tristes caminando, regando la tierra con su llanto pobre, salieron deprisa por la madrugada, sin llevarse nada, sin saber a dónde. Buscan un camino que les ponga a salvo, que les lleve lejos de su tierra madre, de esa tierra suya que les fue arrancada, sembrada de odio, regada con sangre. Tras ellos quedan rumor de muerte y de desamparo. Para no perder la vida hay que abandonar el campo, pero la vida se queda allá. Se quedan los sueños, se queda la libertad, y van caminando sin saber si volverán. Caminan cansados, caminan hambrientos, sin comprender nada de su destino. Blancos, negros, indios, hombres y mujeres que alumbran sus hijos en el camino. Y día con día va creciendo el río, que no encuentra mares para refugiarse. El río de gente que va caminando, mientras se pregunta lo que hoy nadie sabe. Porque hoy nadie sabe de quién es la tierra que ayer fue la suya, esa tierra madre. Si es de los fusiles peso de las banderas o de quien la sufra, la cuide y la labre. Tras ellos quedan rumor de muerte y de desamparo. Para no perder la vida hay que abandonar el campo. Pero la vida se queda allá. Se quedan los sueños, se queda la libertad. Y van caminando sin saber si volverán. Caminan cansados, caminan hambrientos sin comprender nada de su destino. Blancos, negros, indios, hombres y mujeres que alumbran sus hijos en el camino. Blancos, negros, indios, hombres y mujeres que alumbran sus hijos en el camino, en el camino. Blancos, negros, indios, hombres y mujeres. Muchas gracias. Bueno, quiero continuar.
I'm going to continue now with a song that many of you know. And you're invited to join me if you wish. This song makes us feel closer to Colombia. That Colombia that many of us have enjoyed and that we all hold dearly in our hearts. This song is called Pueblito Mío.
Consentida colgada del cielo como un farolito que puso mi Dios para que alumbrara las noches calladas de este pueblo viejo de mi corazón.
Qué lindo coro.
Lunita consentida colgada del cielo, de este pueblo viejo de mi corazón, pueblito de mis cuitas, de casas pequeñitas, por tus calles tranquilas corrió mi juventud. Por ti aprendí a querer por la primera vez y nunca me enseñaste lo que es la ingratitud. Hoy que vuelvo a tus lares trayendo mis cantares y con el alma enferma de tanto padecer, quiero pueblito viejo morir aquí en tu suelo, bajo la luz del cielo que un día me vio nacer. Hoy que vuelvo a tus lares trayendo mis cantares y con el alma enferma de tanto padecer, quiero pueblito viejo morir aquí en tu suelo, bajo la luz del cielo que un día me vio nacer.
Bueno, ya para finalizar.
And to finish, I'm going to sing those songs that are so close to our hearts, the cumbias. And they're going to introduce this song that I'm going to sing now because you know it very, very well. And please join me and dance.
Va subiendo la corriente con chinchorro y atarraya, la canoa de bareque para llegar a la playa. Va subiendo la corriente con chinchorro y atarraya, la canoa de bareque para llegar a la playa. El pescador habla con la luna, habla con la playa, tiene fortuna, solo su atarraya. El pescador habla con la playa, no tiene fortuna, solo su atarraya. La luna espera sonriente con su mágico esplendor, la canoa de bareque y del alegre pescador. La luna espera sonriente con su mágico esplendor, la canoa de bareque y del alegre pescador. Dice, el pescador habla con la luna, habla con la playa, no tiene fortuna, solo su atarraya. Habla con la luna, habla con la playa, no tiene fortuna, solo su atarraya. Regresan los pescadores con su carga pa' vender al puerto de sus amores, donde tiene su querer. Regresan los pescadores con su carga pa' vender al puerto de sus amores, donde tiene su querer. El pescador, ¿sabes? El pescador habla con la playa, no tiene fortuna, solo su atarraya. Habla con la luna, habla con la playa, no tiene fortuna, solo su atarraya. Muy bien. Muchas gracias.
Thanks very much.
Y es así.
Thanks very much, everybody, for sharing my music with you.
Es así. Es así como vamos.
And this is how we're going to say for the time being, hasta luego, see you soon. On floor 1, we can continue with our conversations. Outside, I've been told not on floor 1, but rather in the hallway. Just outside the room, one of the of the witnesses have left a panel where we can jot down our ideas, and I invite you to make the most of this cocktail. The best way of saying hasta luego, see you soon, is with rhythm, with hope. We've been able to see firsthand the Colombia that we want to continue enjoying. And now, if you allow me, I'd like to finish quoting William Piedrahita. The desire that we all have is very much expressed by this poet. We felt the energy of music And now I'm going to refer to William Piedrahita's poem, "Let peace with its white dove perch on our land forever, and instead of suffering and anguish, let hope flourish in full bloom, so that the children can hit the streets again, to play, to run in the streets, so that the only sound we hear is their laughter. And when they return happily back home from school, let peace with its white dove perch forever on our land, and let it do so with peace." Thank you. Congratulations, Colombia.